Hello again, this is Doug Oots with Condra Corporation. So in this training, we're going to be installing the Aurora application. In the previous training module, we installed and configured SQL Server Express 2017 on this same Windows Server 2019 box here I have in my lab. And so today we're going to be installing the Aurora Installer package here for remote access, and I already have my license downloaded based on my forest root domain. Now let's switch over and look at the AD and file system environment. So the goal here is we have some departments here in Active Directory that need access to on-prem file storage. So we're going to be focusing on the HR users here. We have an HR department with some members here. And then on the file system side, there's an HR department folder that this particular, if we look at the properties and security, we'll see that the HR department has access to this. So we want to be able to provide Active Directory authentication, and then based on the permissions that they already have in Windows, provide remote access. So that's our goal. So let's switch back over to the Aurora server here. And so I'm going to go ahead and start the Aurora installer and launch it. Go ahead and agree to the license terms and select install. And this will start laying down the package. Go ahead and select next. I'm going to configure the web application and then start the install. Then I'm going to go ahead and launch the config utility. So the first thing is to configure the database. That's why we install SQL Server Express first. We need that done as a prerequisite. Go ahead and select next. And I installed it on the same server, and so it's 172.17.2.151 for my IP address. I need to set a password for the database accounts. Say OK. And then even though we're not installing the external portal, we'll go ahead, still need to go ahead and set up the account in the database. Now here we want to uncheck Windows authentication and log in using the SA account that we configured earlier. And so when we install SQL Express, and then go ahead and test the credentials. That looks good, so go ahead and select next. Okay, now that that is completed, next thing is to install the license. So I already have my license downloaded here for my cctech.org forest root domain. Yes, and close. And then we're going to configure the web application. So what's going to happen here is the IIS web application is going to get laid down and create all the different accounts and rules needed for IIS to work with Aurora. Go ahead and enable these. Okay, and then now that that's completed, I'll go ahead and select next. Now here's where you're going to need to configure a host name in DNS. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to switch over to my domain controller where I have my DNS utility over here, and I'm going to go in and add a new host record for Aurora and point it to the IP address of that server. All right, and switch back over to my Aurora server and go ahead and do a refresh here. And now that that's been completed. I'm going to go ahead and create the user accounts in Active Directory. And by default, it's going to be in the users organizational unit in Active Directory, but you can browse out and select like a service accounts container if you have something like that configured in your AD environment. So I'm going to take the default and select next. And do the same thing for these Aurora groups here as well. Select next. And these are the different firewall settings. I have mine turned off on my servers in my lab. And select finish. Now that that's complete, there's a URL here that we can use to log in. Now, if we take a look at in Active Directory in the Aurora, there's an Aurora users that we're going to use here in a second. And then also there's a Aurora admins. And by default, the user that you're logged in as, which I was logged in as administrator, gets added to that group for management. If you need to add another group into here that will be managing Aurora, then you'll need to add them to the Aurora admins. Now the other thing that we'll do, we can go ahead and do this now. This Aurora users would be the users that are a member of that group will be able to log in remotely. So what I'm going to do for this training, I'm just going to go and select these users in HR and add them to the Aurora users group while I'm here. Okay. Now let's switch back over to Aurora, and we're going to click on this URL here to launch the Aurora management interface. Now you'll notice that your connection is not private. This is another thing that that you'll want to do is to go ahead and configure a trusted certificate for your Aurora server based on whatever vendor that you choose to do that with. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here as administrator. Put in my password and log in. So the next thing we'll do is go to administration, configure. So the first thing you'll notice here is you can upload a new license. So if your trial is expiring and you want to install a production license, this is where you would go under the administration tab. And then this is the authorized users group. Only the users that are in this group will be able to log in and access Aurora. And when you do the initial installation, the installation creates this group. And then earlier we added the HR department users in for access. Now, and then you can also optionally put in excluded users that are not allowed to have remote access. Here, I'm going to select from an integration, I want to have home folder storage automatically get mounted, and I'm going to use the home as my alias for that folder. If you have Synergy, our other product, then it can automatically map collaborative storage as well as auxiliary storage. For this training, I don't have Synergy installed, so I'm going to disable those. And then here are some timeout settings for the web application. So I'm going to go ahead and save these settings. The next thing we want to do is you can go to branding, and the training manual will walk you through setting up the branding that you may want to set up for your particular company. And the documentation will walk you through how to set up that. So you could change this right here to your particular organization name. Now, but here's where I want to get to now is the storage mapping. So remember we mentioned that we want to provide the HR department access. So I'm going to go ahead and do new right here. And I'm going to call this HR. I'll just call it HR data. Now the target account in Active Directory is the HR department group. So I need to put in CC Tech for my domain and then HRDEPT. And then my target path is going to be my HQ departments and then HR department folder here. Okay, so I'm going to switch back over to Aurora, see if I can get this right. That would be W 2019-M2, I believe, is that server. And then backslash, and then HQ departments, and then HR. Let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, HR department right here. So let's see if I go ahead and do update, it'll tell me if I have it right or not. Looks like I had it right. So this is providing access to any user in the HR department, and if they have rights in Active Directory or Windows to access this data, they will be able to access it remotely. Now, I'm not going to set up any of the other uh, configurations here for sharing, and the mail templates are required for the sharing as well. We're just going to set up remote access. So now that I have this done and some basics, so I'm going to switch over to my Windows server, and one of the users that I'm going to log into is Josh Reed here. So let me switch over here, minimize this. So HTTPS and then aurora.org. Once again, if you have a trusted certificate, you would have already installed this to bypass this. And now I'm going to log in as jreed with my AD password. Now that I've logged in, there's the HR data and how he can get access to the employee folders here, everything that he has on-prem. There's his presentations. He can download and upload from here. And there's additional training in the documentation that'll walk you through just basically, the interface. But, I use this working from home all the time. So I access all my forms. I can upload and download from here. And here I also have access to my home folder since I configured that in the settings. So this is basically completes some basic training on getting Aurora set up so that you can gain remote access into your data from an administration standpoint on the Aurora server. If you can see all the audit logs for when somebody's logged in. You can see here Jay Reed logged in. You'll see everything that he's listed, and then there's also we don't have guest sharing turned on. But basically, you have complete logging of everything that's going on with Aurora. So with that, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.